So help me discern or differentiate these various types
Mhm.
of martial arts.
Yes.
We have, let's say we have wrestling. There in the Olympics, there's Greco-Roman and freestyle. Can you help me? What's the difference between those two, please?
Okay, yeah. So, simply put, for Greco-Roman, you cannot touch the legs. Okay, so that makes
That's
it.
why they're upright
That's
like
why they're
that.
upright and they're more here, instead of down low with their heads low. Um, and that seems to have a lot of applicability when you come into, say, a mixed martial arts forum, right? Because now you're used to being so upright as is, and strikes kind of lead to upper body clinches a lot. So you see a lot of, like we're seeing now with a lot of the high level European and Chechenian type wrestlers that are very, very good at Greco transition to MMA very well, right? Because they're already so
I see.
used to that. Freestyle, you're allowed to attack the whole body.
Okay.
Where it would differ from American folk style, because American folk style, we can attack the whole body, and that's what most people would see, like at school or in college or high school or what have you, or in kids.
Uh-huh.
You can attack the whole body, but it's much more of a takedown battle. You start on your feet, you get a takedown, and then if 10 seconds goes by and there's not a turn, the ref brings you back up. There's a couple other rules where, honestly, fight applicability, freestyle probably has the least because you don't have to exhibit control to obtain points. So,
But how about the pin though? But you
but
win
now
with a
that
pin.
win with a
right?
pin. But once you get to the very, very high level, how often does a pin happen versus a takedown? And I'm going to roll
You win
you.
on points.
And
Okay.
and like in American folk style, actually I think translates very, very well to fight applicability. Say MMA or in the real world for self defense, because it's, or jujitsu, very high translation to jujitsu, because there's such an emphasis on controlling your opponent. Whereas in freestyle, I can roll you and just kind of roll you through, and nothing really happens, and 2 points.
Gotcha.
And in, say, American folk style, half Nelson, I got to hold you 1, 2. Now I got 2 points. So it's a
Gotcha.
little different in that respect. And you get highly rewarded in American folk style for staying on top and putting your opponent in danger, or back points, as we say in America.
Right.
Whereas freestyle, you get that reward, but it's also simply easier to take down and not try to put them in danger as much.
Gotcha. So help me with these other types of wrestling. There's
Yes, yeah.
catch wrestling.
Yes.
There's shoot fighting. There's trap fighting. What is trap? What is catch wrestling?
So-
What is trap fighting?
These are good questions. So, catch wrestling, I know a little bit about. The other ones, maybe I'm not going to know the rule set so perfect, but seemingly the goal of all of them is to figure out a martial art of positioning. How can I outposition my opponent without strikes, right, to
Right.
deal damage, but then still put them in a dangerous position? If this were a fight, I'm going to be the victor. So catch-can wrestling, think mix American folk style with the heavy control element, and yes, there is a pin, but also some submissions like in jiu-jitsu, and where maybe IBJJF jiu-jitsu rules don't allow you to do certain holds, bicep slicers, calf slicers, and such. Those come from catch-can wrestling.
Yeah, what I've seen with catch wrestling, they've got these things called
It is
cranks.
It's intense.
Oh, you don't go to sleep. You
No,
scream.
you got a spine thing.
Right. You go out in pain. It's like, stop. You start weeping. You tap for a different reason.
And I think actually a good friend of mine who's on Team USA's beach wrestling team, Mike Clark of Kentucky, and he is the University of Louisville's head wrestling coach right now. One of the 70-kilogram wrestlers. He's going to go to the World Championships of catch wrestling in London this spring, and I got invited. So we'll see what happens. I'm not for sure if I'm doing that, but it's interesting, right? And
Right.
it seems like there's a pin, so they would award you for just staying in a dominant top position. So they kind of kill the jiu-jitsu part of pulling guard. and then there are still submissions, right? So you
Right.
can maybe be in like a half guard or something and not get pinned and still apply your bottom submissions from jujitsu. But it seems vicious.
It seems really vicious, which takes us into the submission wrestling and then the jiu-jitsu world. And you've got the Japanese jiu-jitsu,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have what the Gracies and the Brazilians did with it, making it a Brazilian flavor of
Oh yeah.
jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah.
Amazing lineage there and where it has gone and evolved. And I just saw, I get these little advertisements because Facebook and YouTube know what I like.
Of course.
And it shows the latest development in no gi. That's where you don't have any of the robe to grab onto.
No kimonos.
No kimonos. And this is still evolving.
Mhm.
The various grabs without a gi, these I'm seeing leg triangles around the arm, and
Mhm.
it still is developing and evolving and getting better, which I find just really fascinating.
I think we're at a very interesting time in grappling history, combat sport history, where, in the 90s, we had UFC and MMA really kick off. And then it's kind of taken shape now to having more of a rule set. And then that makes you think about what to do differently, right? When I first came into coaching wrestling for MMA at Hewlett House here in town, where I work with several pro fighters, one guy who's in the UFC, Darian Weeks, a couple other Bellator level, LFA level guys. You have to go, okay, sport of wrestling, what can you do? More of, oh, this is an open fight forum, and that's kind of where I came up with the martial art of wrestling. More of a truth rather than here are the rules, now I'm going to alter it to the rule set. So, in a fight on the street, if someone can punch you and you're in a low stance, well, you're just getting your nose beat up all the time, right? You got to stand
Right.
up tall, protect your face, but still have a good quick down block and, sprawl to get your feet back and everything else. And it's quite interesting. And then with no-gi, to kind of add on to what you were saying, they're originally seemingly coming from the gi world of jiu-jitsu, at least in the beginning, and it's like, oh, well, there's a no-gi thing, and gi jiu-jitsu seems to be trying, and I could be wrong and a little biased, but seems to be trying to change their rules to keep wrestlers from dominating their world, which makes sense because they have a goal. Their goal is to be a submission fighting sport and not emphasize the takedown as much. So then they kind of build their rules such, and that's good. And from that, you get amazing techniques you wouldn't otherwise have, right? Because with the niche disciplines, you get the very high level in that area. No-gi, well, you can't do your lapel chokes. You can't do so many things. So it immediately is a much more wrestling hospitable environment.
Mhm.
I'm seeing a lot of great wrestlers transition to that and do very well very quickly.
Sure.
And you have to develop a different style, because if you just go wrestle, there's so many things that's going to get you beat from someone who's a good jiu-jitsu artist. But if you just go do jiu-jitsu and you're in a no-gi, there's going to be a lot of stuff you can't do that you could do before. So right now, leg locks, seem to be what everyone does in the world. And, phenomenal. And they don't let you do it in like gi jiu-jitsu till you're...
So your brown belt.
I was going to say
Yeah.
a certain level.
Dangerous stuff.
And I don't come from that world. And my argument would be, you should teach it in the beginning, because if it's dangerous, now you've waited until they're good, and now you're day one brown belt, and also, now your knee's blown out. That's not a good idea.
Right.
But, mixing in high-level wrestling with high-level jiu-jitsu, new techniques are going to emerge. So, like with leg locks, man, if you can hit a good low single, like in wrestling, and drive that into a leg lock, because you already kind of have the ankle pinned, now you're in a whole new game that you wouldn't have ever been in before, because a low single in gi jiu-jitsu, I found, gets your head choked really quick.
Yes. Right
But
into
now
the choke.
there's no gi I have to worry about. Well, I can fight your hands and your feet and not worry about you grabbing, your cuff of your pant.
Yeah. Now, I kind of wanted to do a purview of all martial arts and including striking, but I'm afraid this is going to take an awful long time. Because you got your Muay Thai, you got your karate, you got your Taekwondo, you got your you name it, like your Kung
Sambo.
Fu. Sambo. Oh, don't even get me started
Senegalese
on Samba.
wrestling.
Oh, yeah, that was another question I wanted to ask you real quick before I go to the striking. Senegalese wrestling is on a beach.
Yeah.
They seem like big ass, strong, mean guys. What is different about Senegalese wrestling and the beach wrestling you're doing?
It doesn't seem like much.
Okay.
It seems like, so from what I could tell, and I watched a little bit on it, there's two forms of Senegalese wrestling, one where they're allowed to strike and one where they're not, and I couldn't tell you the name of the difference.
Okay.
But it's basically sand wrestling. It's beach wrestling. And it makes sense because the UWW, United World Wrestling, which is the overall arching wrestling entity that does freestyle, Greco, beach wrestling, from what I understand, went, hey, you know, we have Senegalese wrestling, we have Indians folk style wrestling, we have, you know, Azerbaijan sand wrestling, all these other forms of wrestling around the world that are basically in sand, dirt, mud, etc. Let's make an internationally aligned style and run with this. And that's seemingly what we're doing now. And I think that's really cool because you can unite so many more people that, you know, I don't know if they can afford it or not, but it's not easy to have a mat necessarily. But it's relatively simple to go, hey, there's some soft ground. Let's go throw each other around. You know, who can push you out of the circle? Who can throw who to the ground?
Yeah, I've seen videos of jujitsu classes in very poor areas, and they just have a little tiny mat, a little square mat, so they can do it because they can't afford a studio fully
exactly
matted out.